6 weeks after my mother-in-law moved into our house, my husband told me he wanted a separation, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the beginning because the beginning matters. It always does. My husband, I'll call him by what he was to me, my husband, and I had been together for 4 years before we got married. We met at a work conference in Ottawa, of all places, both of us stuck at the same terrible networking dinner where the salmon was overcooked, and the speeches ran 40 minutes too long. We ended up sneaking out to find a shawarma place 2 blocks away, and by the time we'd finished eating, I knew I wanted to keep talking to him forever. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony in Kelowna, near where my parents retired. It was September, the kind of clear blue September day that makes you feel like the whole world is holding its breath with you. We settled in Hamilton. He worked in logistics for a manufacturing company, and I was in corporate accounting. I had been since I was 26, worked my way up to senior analyst by 31. I mention that because it matters later. It matters a lot. His mother lived in Thunder Bay. His sister, I'll call her my sister-in-law, lived about 20 minutes from us in a rental that she'd shared with her ex-partner until the relationship ended. She had a son from that relationship. He was 12, smart kid, quiet. His father was not involved and had never paid child support, not a single check in 4 years. My sister-in-law worked part-time at a hair salon, enough to cover groceries and her portion of expenses, but not enough to be comfortable. Not in this economy, not with a kid. My husband helped his family. I understood that going in. He was close with his mother, devoted to his sister, and I respected it. What I didn't fully understand was where helping ended and where I began carrying the weight. In the first year of our marriage, it was small things. He'd send his mother $200 here, $300 there. Birthday money. Help when her furnace needed repair. When his sister's car needed new brake pads, he covered it. I didn't say anything. These felt like family things, the kind of gestures you make, because you love people. In the second year, he told me his sister needed help with his nephew's school fees. His nephew attended a private school. His father had enrolled him years before when things were different, and pulling him out mid-year felt disruptive. The tuition was $14,000 a year. My husband asked if we could cover it just for 1 year, until his sister stabilized her income. I said yes. We covered it the second year too, and the third. By the time we were discussing the 4th year, I had stopped saying yes and started saying nothing, which is different, but I didn't fully understand that yet. Meanwhile, the household finances had shifted in ways I hadn't tracked carefully enough. We split bills on a shared spreadsheet, but my husband's contributions had started varying month to month. Some months he was short because he'd sent money home. Some months I covered the mortgage gap without saying anything. I was making more than him, not drastically, but consistently, and somewhere along the way, the assumption formed that my income had more elasticity, more room. That assumption was never discussed, it was just absorbed. My mother-in-law came to visit in November. She'd been having some health issues. Nothing serious, her doctor said, mostly stress-related, but she was anxious about being alone. The plan was 2 weeks, maybe 3. By Christmas, she was still there. My sister-in-law had started coming over almost every day, ostensibly to see her mother, but she brought her son, who was lovely, and her opinions, which were not. The first time she commented on my cooking was 3 days after my mother-in-law moved in. I'd made a chicken and vegetable stir-fry. Nothing complicated, just a weeknight dinner. And my sister-in-law stood at the counter while I served it and said, "Oh, she doesn't really eat this kind of food." She meaning my mother-in-law. I looked at my husband. He was looking at the table. I made my mother-in-law a separate plate of buttered toast and some canned soup. She thanked me and said nothing to her daughter about the comment. The comments didn't stop. My sister-in-law had a way of delivering criticism wrapped in observation, so it never quite landed as an insult you could push back on. "You keep the living room quite cool, don't you? Is this the floor cleaner you always use?" That's an interesting way to organize the pantry. Every sentence ended with the kind of pause that invited me to feel wrong about my own home. My husband heard most of it. He continued to look at tables, windows, his phone. Anywhere but me. By February, my mother-in-law had started making a weekly grocery list that she'd leave on the counter. Not for herself. A list for me. What she preferred for breakfast, what she needed for her teas. A specific brand of crackers available at a store 20 minutes away. I drove there twice before I realized that I had somehow become a person who drove 20 minutes out of her way. For crackers she didn't eat. I brought it up to my husband one evening. We were washing dishes together, which was one of the few moments we still had that felt like just us. I told him I was feeling stretched. That the house didn't feel like our house anymore. That I needed us to talk about what this arrangement actually was, and when it was going to change. He listened. He nodded. He said he understood, that it was just temporary, that his mother was still getting her strength back, that his sister was going through a hard time. I asked him when he thought it would end. He said he didn't know, but he was sure it would sort itself out. It did not sort itself out. In March, my sister-in-law mentioned to my husband that her apartment lease was ending in June, and she was thinking about her options. My husband came to me that weekend and gently, very gently, the way someone approaches a horse they're not sure is calm, suggested that maybe his sister and nephew could stay with us for a few months while she looked for a new place. I said no. It was the first time I had said no clearly, without softening it, without adding maybe or let me think about it or I understand she's in a tough spot. I said no, and I watched something shift in my husband's face. Not anger, exactly. More like recalibration. He didn't argue. He went quiet, and he stayed quiet for 3 days, and the quiet was the kind that fills every room it enters. His mother and sister both seemed to know about the conversation, though I hadn't told them. The atmosphere in the house changed. My mother-in-law stopped saying good morning first. My sister-in-law's visits became shorter but more charged. Like she was making a point by being slightly less present. My husband moved around me with the careful politeness of someone managing a difficult coworker. One evening in April, my sister-in-law arrived while I was making dinner. I had been at work since 7:30 that morning. I had a report due the following day, and I was tired in the particular way that lives in your shoulders and behind your eyes. I was making a pasta bake, nothing fancy, a sheet pan of roasted vegetables, a simple tomato sauce, some Italian sausage from the butcher on our street. My sister-in-law looked at the stove and said, "Oh, is that all there is? Mom doesn't really eat heavy food at dinner." Something in me went very still. I set down the wooden spoon. I turned around. I said, in a voice I barely recognized, "Your mother is welcome to make herself something she prefers. The kitchen is available." My sister-in-law stared at me. My husband, who had just walked in from the hallway, looked between us and said nothing. I served dinner. My mother-in-law ate a small plate and said it was fine. My sister-in-law ate a large portion without commenting. My husband ate in careful silence. That night, after everyone had gone, my husband came into our bedroom and closed the door, and told me that he thought I had been rude to his sister. I asked him what she had said. He said it wasn't about what she said. It was about how I responded. I sat with that for a moment, and then I asked him something I hadn't asked before. How much of our household income, total, had gone towards supporting his mother and his sister and his nephew over the past 3 years? He didn't know the number. I did. I had the spreadsheet. I had done the accounting, quietly, over several months, adding it up the way you do when you can feel something but can't name it yet. Between the tuition payments, 3 years at $14,000, so $42,000. His mother's expense since she'd moved in, which I had been largely covering, and the various transfers and contributions over the years, was somewhere between $65,000 and $70,000. The majority of it had come from my income. His contributions had supplemented it. Mine had carried it. I showed him the spreadsheet. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't realize it had gotten to that." I said, "I know." He said, "I think maybe we have some different values around family." And I said, "I think maybe we do." He brought up separation 2 weeks later. He said he'd been thinking about it for a while, that he felt like we'd grown in different directions, that he didn't think I understood what family meant to him. I asked him if his sister and his mother knew he was having this conversation with me. He paused too long before saying no. I said okay. I said I agreed with him. I said I thought separation was the right decision. He seemed surprised. I think he had expected more resistance, more negotiation, more of the careful management I had waited for 3 years. But I was tired of managing. I was so tired of it. I called my lawyer the next morning. She is very good. Sharp, practical, not the kind of person who wastes a single billable minute on anything that doesn't matter. I had asked a colleague for her name 6 months earlier, which tells you something about where my head had been. My lawyer and I went through the finances carefully. In Ontario, when you're dividing marital assets, the money you've spent supporting a spouse's family members is a real consideration. She told me to document everything, which I had already done. She told me to be patient, which was harder. The first thing I did, practically speaking, was call the private school where my nephew attended and inform them that the tuition arrangement I had been funding was no longer something I could continue. I spoke to the registrar very calmly, gave them 6 weeks' notice, and asked them to inform the family directly that the sponsorship was ending at the conclusion of the current term. I also stopped the automatic transfer I had set up to help with my mother-in-law's monthly expenses. I had been sending $800 a month, which I had never formalized, never discussed with my husband as a line item. It was just something I had started doing and continued doing because no one had ever suggested I should stop. I stopped. I didn't announce any of this. I just stopped. Quietly, the way I had started. My mother-in-law found out about the school within a week. I don't know exactly what my sister-in-law said to my husband, but that evening he came to me and he was not quiet. He said I had blindsided his family. He said pulling his nephew out of school without warning was cruel. He said he couldn't believe I would do this during an already painful time. I waited until he finished. Then I said, I gave 6 weeks' notice. I've been paying that tuition for 3 years with no formal agreement, no acknowledgement, and no discussion of when it would end. I'm ending it now, and I gave more notice than anyone gave me when your sister moved her life into our home. He didn't have an answer to that. We went through mediation in July. My husband brought his mother. His sister attended the first session. My lawyer had them removed before anything substantive was discussed, which was the correct call. Mediation is not a family gathering. It is a legal process. What came out of mediation was a separation agreement that reflected the financial reality of our marriage. The tuition payments I had made, 3 years, $14,000 each, $42,000 total, were factored into the settlement. My husband acknowledged, in writing, the discrepancy in our contributions. He did not have $42,000 to return. We worked out an arrangement that offset it through a reduction in what I owed on a joint asset we were dividing. It wasn't perfect. Settlements never are. But it was fair. My lawyer made sure of that. I moved out in August. My parents drove down from Kelowna to help. My dad, who is the most undemonstrative man I know, the kind of person who shows love by fixing things and asking if you've eaten, spent 2 days helping me set up my new apartment in a high-rise near the waterfront. He built my bed frame. He found the stud in the wall so we could hang shelves properly. He made us eggs and toast on the second morning using my new cast iron pan, which he seasoned correctly because of course he did. My mum brought curtains she'd sewn herself, which she handed to me with absolutely no fanfare. I thought these would suit the light in there, and then went to examine my bathroom for things that needed organizing. They stayed 4 days. I cried twice, and both times they let me without rushing to fix it or tell me it would be fine. My dad just put his hand on my back. My mum made tea. I want to say that I miss what I thought I was building. I do. I miss the version of the marriage that existed in that shawarma place in Ottawa, when he was funny and easy and I thought I knew what I was signing up for. I miss believing it. But I don't miss the person I was becoming in that house. The one who drove 20 minutes for crackers. The one who stood at the stove making a dinner she was too tired to make, while someone who hadn't worked a full week in months stood at her counter and criticized it. The one who said nothing, and nothing, and nothing, until saying nothing was all she knew how to do. I got the keys to my apartment on a Friday afternoon. I walked in with one bag while the movers were still unloading, and I stood in the empty living room, and I looked at all that quiet space that was entirely mine. I made a cup of tea. I sat on the floor because I didn't have a chair yet, and for the first time in a very long time, I breathed all the way in. My nephew is doing fine, by the way. I checked, discreetly, through a mutual acquaintance. He transferred to a public school and he's settled in well. Kids are more resilient than adults give them credit for. He deserved better than a situation built on money that was never offered freely. My mother-in-law moved back to Thunder Bay. My sister-in-law found a 2-bedroom apartment and is working more hours now. I don't know the details and I don't need to. What I know is that the system they had, the quiet, unspoken arrangement, where my income was available to absorb whatever the family needed. That system ended when I said yes to the separation. I should have said no sooner. I know that. But I also know that I did what I could with what I understood at the time. I kept saying yes, because I wanted to be the kind of person who shows up for her family. It took me a long time to notice that I wasn't being that person for myself. I'm a senior analyst. I've built financial models for companies with 12-figure revenues. I understand how compounding works, how something small that repeats becomes something enormous if you don't account for it. I just hadn't applied that logic to my own life. I do now. My apartment has a balcony that faces west. In the evenings, the light comes in at an angle that turns everything gold. And I sit out there with my tea and I watch the city and I think about what I'm building next. Just for me this time. Just mine. It's a good light. I like it very much.